The final day of combat arrived. Grace woke early and touched the small wooden star her son had given her. Her body was a map of pain, bruised ribs, torn muscles, cuts, and scrapes. But her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. Across the arena, Kralvox entered looking different than before. His armor had been repaired, but his movements lacked their earlier confidence. The wound in his shoulder had been treated but still troubled him. When Vorshan's projection appeared, the advisor spoke with unusual gravity. Today's combat will end only in victory or death. There will be no further delays. Grace and Kralvox faced each other at the center of the arena. You have earned respect, Grace of Earth, the alien champion said. No being has fought me to a fourth day. I don't want your respect, Grace replied. I want your surrender. Kralvox made a sound that might have been laughter. That will never happen. Then let's finish this. The final combat began with explosive intensity. Kralvox attacked with desperate power, as if trying to end the fight quickly. Grace avoided his initial rush, but couldn't completely dodge a sweeping blow that caught her leg. She felt something snap and pain shot through her. She fell to one knee, and the alien moved in for what he thought was the kill. But Grace had been waiting for this, pretending to be more injured than she was. As Kralvox lunged forward, she threw dirt into his face and rolled away. The alien roared in anger, wiping at his eyes. Grace used the moment to strike at his injured shoulder again, driving her baton into the wound with all her strength. Kralvox stumbled but didn't fall. He swung wildly, catching Grace across the chest and sending her flying across the arena. She hit the wall hard, the air driven from her lungs. On Earth, people watched in horror. Many covered their eyes, unable to bear seeing their champion fall. Get up, Lisa whispered. Get up, Grace. In the arena, Grace struggled to her feet, her vision blurred. Blood trickled from her mouth, but she stood. Kralvox approached more slowly now, wary of another trap. Your courage is admirable, he said, but this ends now. Grace nodded, gathering her remaining strength. Yes, it does. With startling speed, she threw her grappling hook. Not at Kralvox, but at the ceiling of the arena. The hook caught, and she pulled herself upward just as the alien charged. Confused, Kralvox looked up, and Grace released her hold, dropping directly onto his shoulders. Before he could react, she had her knife at his throat, its point pressing into the soft area where his armor didn't protect. Yield, she gasped, blood dripping from her mouth. Never, the alien growled, reaching up to grab her. Grace drove the knife in slightly, just enough to draw blood. Your people value honor. There's no honor in dying when you could live to fight another day. Kralvox went still. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Then, slowly, the alien champion lowered his arms. I yield, he said, the words sounding torn from his throat. A shock of silence fell over the arena. Then Vorshan appeared, his projection larger than before. The combat is ended, the advisor announced. The champion of Earth is victorious. Grace slid from Kralvox's shoulders, barely able to stand. The alien turned to face her, and to everyone's surprise, he knelt. How? He asked quietly. How did a being so small defeat me? Grace looked at him through swollen eyes. You fought with strength. I fought with everything I had. On the Zarkon ship, the alien leaders watched in stunned silence. On Earth, cheers erupted from every corner of the planet. When Grace returned to the transport chamber, Vorshan waited for her. The Zarkon Empire honors its agreements, he said. Earth will remain free. No ship of ours will enter your space again without invitation. Grace nodded weakly. Thank you. Our Emperor has a question, Vorshan added. What is it that makes humans so dangerous? Grace thought for a moment. We were never the strongest species on our planet. We survived by adapting, by turning weakness into strength. We've spent our history fighting ourselves and learning from every failure. She looked at the stars visible through a nearby window. We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we never stop learning how to win. 3 days later, Grace Miller returned to Earth a hero, and in the stars, word began to spread. The third planet from the yellow sun was home to warriors unlike any the galaxy had seen before. The third day began with a strange quiet. Grace entered the arena with steady steps despite her injuries. Overnight, she had reset her dislocated shoulder against the wall of her chamber. The pain was bad, but movement had returned. Across the arena, Kralvox waited. His wounds from the previous days had been treated, but he moved with new caution. "You have fought well," he said as Grace approached the center. "Better than any champion in many cycles." "Thank you," Grace replied. "It changes nothing," the alien added. "Today you will fall." Grace nodded. "We'll see." For those watching from Earth, something seemed different about Grace today. Her movements were more deliberate. Her eyes never left the alien champion. "She's got something planned," Lisa said quietly. In the arena, the combat resumed. But this time, Grace did not use the same tactics as before. Instead of dodging and retreating, she began moving in patterns that seemed random at first. Kralvox attacked with powerful swings and thrusts, but Grace was no longer where his strikes landed. She moved like water around stone, flowing rather than jumping. "What is she doing?" Ellen asked, watching the feed. Olivia's eyes widened. "She's using his patterns against him. Look, when he attacks high, he always shifts his weight to the left. She's positioning herself where he won't be able to recover quickly." On the moon, Grace continued her strange dance. She had stopped talking to Kralvox, focusing entirely on movement. The alien grew frustrated. His attacks became stronger, but less controlled. "Stand and fight," he roared after missing again. Grace didn't reply. She was watching, waiting. The alien had fallen into the rhythm she had planned over the past 2 days, the predictable pattern she had carefully encouraged through their exchanges. Then came the moment she had been preparing for. Kralvox made the exact sequence she had anticipated, a high strike, followed by a low sweep, ending with his weight shifted forward. Grace moved, not away but toward him. She used her grappling hook for the first time, throwing it to wrap around his extended arm. Before he could react, she pulled hard while sliding beneath him. The combination of her pull and his forward momentum sent him crashing to the ground. Grace was on him instantly, her knife finding the same shoulder wound from the first day. She drove the blade deeper this time, twisting it where she knew it would cause the most pain. Kralvox roared and thrashed, throwing her off. She rolled away, barely avoiding his desperate grab, but she had done real damage. The alien champion rose to his feet slowly, black blood flowing freely down his arm. "How?" he demanded. "How did you know?" Grace stood steady, knife ready. "I watched. I learned. Just like you did with the others." For the first time, uncertainty showed in the alien's eyes. He had never faced an opponent who could read him so well, who could turn his strength into weakness. Vorshan's projection appeared suddenly between them. "The day's combat is complete," the advisor announced. "Continue tomorrow." Grace could see the intervention for what it was. The Zarkon were giving their champion time to recover from a wound that might be serious. As she returned to her chamber, Grace felt a small victory. She had hurt him, really hurt him. And more importantly, she had made him doubt. In the Colorado facility, the team erupted in cheers when Grace landed the critical blow. People hugged each other, some crying with relief and hope. "She can win this," Frank said, his voice filled with wonder. "She actually can win." William nodded. "It's not just physical now. She's in his head." On the Zarkon ship, the alien leaders gathered in urgent conference. This had never happened before. No champion had ever wounded Kralvox twice, let alone made him appear vulnerable. "The human is dangerous," one said. "She is small but fights with her mind," another added. Vorishan looked troubled. If Kralvox falls, It changes everything. As night fell on the lunar arena, both champions prepared for what would come next. The final day was approaching. Only one would leave alive. The first day of combat ended with both fighters still standing, though Grace was clearly worse for wear. She limped to her side of the arena where a small chamber had appeared in the wall. Inside was a bed, water, and basic medical supplies. Grace washed her wounds and wrapped her ribs, which were likely cracked. She drank water slowly and ate the food provided. Then she closed her eyes, but did not sleep. Instead, she reviewed everything she had learned about Kralvox. When morning came, Grace had a plan. She stepped back into the arena where Kralvox already waited. He had repaired his armor at the puncture point. His black blood had dried, but the wound still seemed to trouble him. He watched Grace with what might have been respect. "You survived the first day," he said. "Few have done so." Grace nodded. "Tell me about the others." The question seemed to surprise him. "What?" "The other champions you faced. What were they like?" Kralvox was silent for a moment. Then he said, "The Mavorian champion was a giant with 4 arms. The Trellix sent a creature that could change its shape. The Aurist fighter was small, but could move faster than sight. And you beat them all," Grace said. She began to circle slowly, not attacking but keeping a safe distance. "Yes, as I will beat you. How did you defeat the Aurist, if it was so fast?" Kralvox followed her movement. "I learned its patterns. All beings fall into patterns." Grace nodded. "That's true. Even you." The alien made a sound like grinding stones. It took Grace a moment to realize he was laughing. "You think you know my patterns, human?" "I'm learning," Grace said. She attacked then, not directly but at an angle, using her baton to strike at his knee again. Kralvox blocked easily and countered with a sweep of his arm. Grace ducked and moved away. The day continued like this. Brief exchanges followed by circles of talk and movement. To observers, it might have seemed like Grace was buying time or simply trying to survive. But she was doing something more important. In the Colorado facility, Olivia watched the feed with growing excitement. "She's doing it," she said to Alan. "She's mapping his responses." Alan looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Every fighter has a decision tree. If attacked this way, they respond that way. Grace is building a complete map of his responses." Lisa nodded. "And she's using conversation to rest between exchanges while keeping him engaged." Back in the arena, Grace had taken several more hits. Her left arm hung awkwardly, possibly dislocated. But she kept talking, kept moving. "Your empire," she said, breathing hard. "Tell me about it." Kralvox seemed puzzled by her continued questions but answered anyway. "We rule 37 worlds. Soon, Earth will be the 38th. And what happens to those worlds? To their people? They serve the Empire. They provide resources, labor, soldiers." Grace nodded. "And if I somehow beat you, what happens then?" Kralvox paused mid-step. "That will not happen. But if it did, then Earth would be recognized as sovereign. No Zarkon ship would enter your space again." Grace smiled slightly. "Good to know." She attacked again, this time using her injured arm as bait. When Kralvox moved to grab it, she was already spinning away, her knife finding a new gap in his armor near his hip. The alien roared and stumbled. More black blood flowed. Grace moved back quickly, holding her position with the knife ready. Her arm throbbed with pain, but her eyes were clear and focused. Kralvox touched his new wound. "You are clever, human. My name is Grace." "Grace," he repeated, the word strange in his mouth. "You fight well for such a small creature." "Size isn't everything," she said, "and I'm just getting started." The second day was ending. Grace had survived again, and had caused the alien champion actual pain. In the viewing chambers of the Zarkon ship, the alien leaders watched with growing concern. On Earth, people began to hope. Grace woke to a low humming sound. The lights in her quarters had brightened, signaling morning. though in space there was no true day or night. She rose from the strange bed and began her preparations. First came stretching, then a series of quick exercises to warm her muscles. She checked each of her weapons carefully. The combat knife was sharp. The reinforced baton was solid. The grappling hook was secure. A meal had been left for her, strange fruits and something like bread. Grace ate sparingly, knowing a full stomach would slow her down. When the door opened, she was ready. The same guards from yesterday led her through the ship to a new area. They entered a large chamber with a circular platform in the center. Vor-Shan waited there. "It is time," the alien said. "You will be transported to the arena." Grace nodded and stepped onto the platform. Lights surrounded her, and she felt a strange pulling sensation. When the light faded, she stood in the lunar arena. It was larger than she had expected. A circular space about 200 feet across. The ground was packed dirt mixed with some shining material. Around the edges rose walls about 20 feet high. Above was a clear dome showing the stars and the earth, hanging like a blue jewel in the blackness. Grace was not alone. On the far side stood Kralvox. In person, he was even more intimidating than in the videos. Nearly 10 feet tall with muscles that rippled under gray skin. His armor gleamed, and in his hands, he held a massive spear-like weapon. Between them, floating in the air, was Vor-Shan's image, a projection of some kind. "Champions of Earth and the Zarkon Empire," the advisor said, "you will fight for the honor of your people. The combat ends with surrender or death." He paused. "Begin." The projection vanished. For a moment, neither fighter moved. Then Kralvox charged. He covered the distance between them with shocking speed, his weapon aimed at Grace's chest. Grace waited until the last possible second before moving. She dodged sideways, feeling the wind as the spear passed inches from her body. The alien's momentum carried him past her, but he recovered quickly. "You are fast, human," Kralvox said, his voice deep and rumbling. "But speed alone will not save you." Grace said nothing. She circled slowly, studying his movements. The alien attacked again, this time with a series of quick thrusts. Grace dodged most, but one caught her arm, tearing her uniform and drawing blood. She ignored the pain and kept moving. In the control room of the Colorado facility, Alan, Lisa, and the team watched via a feed from the arena. The Zarkon had allowed them to observe but not communicate with Grace. "She's just defending," Frank said with worry in his voice. "She needs to attack." "No," Lisa replied. "She's learning. Watch her eyes." Back in the arena, Grace had settled into a rhythm. Dodge, move, observe. Each time Kralvox attacked, she learned something new about how he moved, where his balance shifted, which strikes were his strongest. But the constant movement was tiring her. After 15 minutes of combat, she was breathing hard. A cut on her forehead dripped blood into her eye. Her ribs ached where she had barely avoided a direct hit. Kralvox seemed barely winded. "Your people chose poorly," he said. "You cannot win. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." Grace wiped the blood from her eye. "Not today," she said. She changed tactics, moving closer instead of away. The alien seemed surprised by this approach. He swung his weapon in a wide arc. But Grace was ready. She ducked under it and struck with her baton, hitting his knee joint. Kralvox roared, not in pain, but in anger. He dropped his spear and grabbed for her with massive hands. Grace wasn't quick enough this time. His fingers closed around her arm, lifting her off the ground. "Now you die," he said. But Grace had been waiting for this moment. With her free hand, she drew her knife and stabbed it into the gap in his armor near his shoulder, just where she had spotted the weakness. Kralvox bellowed and dropped her. Black liquid, his blood, seeped from the wound. The first day of combat was just beginning. The Zarkon ship appeared over Earth on a clear Tuesday morning. It moved into orbit silently, a dark shape that blocked the stars. Telescopes showed it was larger than anyone had expected, nearly a mile long with strange markings along its hull. People around the world watched the sky and waited. Some prayed, some cried, some tried to flee to places they thought might be safe, though no one knew where that might be. In Colorado, Grace prepared to leave for the launch site. She wore a simple black uniform designed by Kevin. It looked ordinary, but could protect against extreme temperatures and had hidden pockets for her weapons. "The shuttle is ready," Lisa said from the doorway. "It's time." Grace nodded and picked up her small bag of equipment. "Let's go." The journey to the launch site was quiet. Grace sat looking out the window at the passing landscape. It might be the last time she saw Earth. At the launch pad, a group of world leaders waited to say goodbye. The president shook Grace's hand. "The hopes of humanity go with you," she said. Grace looked her in the eye. "I won't let you down." Ellen and the team gave her final instructions. The combat would take place in an arena the Tsar Khan had built on the far side of the moon. The aliens had provided transportation and guaranteed her safety until the fight began. "Remember everything we've practiced," Frank said, checking her weapons one last time. "Trust your instincts," William added. Olivia hugged her. "We'll be monitoring as best we can. You're not alone up there." The small shuttle that would take Grace to the Tsar Khan ship stood ready. As she walked toward it, a voice called her name. She turned to see Dan and Joey running toward her. They weren't supposed to be there, but someone had allowed them through security. Joey reached her first, throwing his arms around her waist. "Mom, I made you this." He handed her a small wooden carving of a star. "For luck." Grace tucked it into her pocket. "Perfect. Now, I can't lose." Dan embraced her next, holding her tight. "Come back to us," he whispered. "I will," Grace promised. She kissed him goodbye and turned to the shuttle without looking back. The journey to the Tsar Khan ship took 3 hours. Grace spent the time in meditation, focusing her mind on the coming fight. When the shuttle docked with the alien vessel, she was ready. 2 Tsar Khan guards met her at the airlock. They were tall with gray skin and wore ornate armor. They didn't speak but gestured for her to follow. The inside of the ship was strange. Corridors that seemed too tall and narrow, lighting that pulsed slowly, and air that smelled like metal and something sweet. Grace memorized each turn they took, mapping the ship in her mind. They arrived at a chamber where a single Tsar Khan waited. Unlike the guards, this one wore robes instead of armor. Its skin was paler, almost white. "I am Vorshan, advisor to Emperor Tsar Khan," it said in perfect English. "You are the human champion." "I am," Grace replied. Vorshan studied her. "You are smaller than we expected." "Size isn't everything," Grace said. "Perhaps not. However, Kralvox has never lost a combat. He has defeated champions from 37 worlds. There's a first time for everything." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species has spirit. It will make your defeat more honorable." Vorshan explained the rules. The combat would last until surrender or death. Each fighter could use their chosen weapons, but nothing else. The arena had Earth-like gravity and atmosphere for fairness. "The combat begins tomorrow," Vorshan said. "You will be shown to your quarters to rest." As Grace followed another guard, she passed a large window. Outside was Earth, blue and beautiful against the blackness of space. Somewhere down there, her family waited. "I'm coming home," she whispered to herself. "No matter what it takes." Grace stood in a white room surrounded by screens. On each screen was an image of Kralvox, the Tsar Khan champion. The images had been taken from the alien transmission. They showed a massive creature with dark gray skin, standing at least 9 feet tall. "We think their bones are denser than ours," Olivia said, pointing to one image. "Their homeworld has higher gravity, so they evolved stronger." Grace studied the alien's shape. "What about their joints? Do they bend the same way ours do?" "Good question," Olivia said. "From what we can see, Their elbows and knees have more limited movement than human joints. Grace nodded, filing away this information. Every detail mattered. In another room, Frank showed Grace the weapons she could choose. The rules say no energy weapons, just physical ones. Grace picked up a simple combat knife. This feels right. Frank frowned. That's it. What about the plasma-edged sword we developed? Too heavy, Grace said. I need to be faster than him, not stronger. She also selected a reinforced baton and a modified grappling hook. Frank seemed disappointed by her simple choices. Trust me, Grace said. These are the tools I need. Days passed. Grace trained with her chosen weapons against robots designed to move like the Zarkon. She studied recordings of previous alien champions. She worked with William on mental preparation. What are you most afraid of? William asked during one session. Grace didn't answer right away. Not coming home to my family. That's natural, William said. But you need to accept that fear and set it aside during combat. I know, Grace said. In the Marines, we learned that fear is just information. It tells you what matters. 1 month before the alien arrival, Dan and Joey came to visit. The government had kept Grace's identity secret from the public, but her family knew what was coming. Joey hugged his mother tight. I told all my friends my mom is saving the world. Grace smiled. I'm just doing my job, kiddo. That night, after Joey had fallen asleep, Dan found Grace looking at the stars outside the facility. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do, she replied. If there's even a small chance I can win, I have to try. He took her hand. I've never asked you about the things you saw in the war, the things you did. Grace looked at him. And I'd always been grateful for that. Will those experiences help you now? Grace nodded slowly. The hardest fights teach you the most important lessons. The next morning, Grace returned to training with new intensity. She pushed herself harder than before. When she broke her finger during a practice session, she simply taped it up and continued. Ellen worried about her. She's going to hurt herself before the real fight even begins, he told Lisa. She knows what she's doing, Lisa replied. She's testing her limits. 2 weeks before the Zarkon ship was due to arrive, the team gathered to watch a new message from the aliens. The message showed Kralvok's training. The alien moved with frightening speed and power, breaking stone pillars with single strikes. The room was silent after the video ended. Finally, Kevin spoke. How can anyone beat that? Grace stood up. I need to see that again. They replayed the video. Grace watched carefully. Her eyes narrowed. There, she said, pointing to the screen. Did you see it? The others looked confused. He favors his right side, Grace explained. And he has a pattern when he attacks. 3 strikes, then he resets his position. Lisa looked at the video again. I don't see it. It's there, Grace insisted. And that's not all. His armor has a gap near the shoulder joint. It's small, but it's there. For the first time since training began, Grace smiled. He's strong, but he has weaknesses. That night, Grace modified her training program. She practiced targeting the specific weaknesses she had identified. She worked on new tactics designed to exploit the patterns she had seen. I can't match his strength, she told Frank. But I don't need to. I just need to survive long enough to find the right moment. The countdown to the alien arrival continued. 7 days. 6. 5. Earth waited. The tournament began 6 weeks after the message arrived. Every country sent their best fighters to a hastily built arena in the Nevada desert. There were soldiers, martial artists, boxers, and special forces operators from around the world. Grace Miller had not planned to enter. She was watching the news about the tournament in her living room when her son Joey asked a question that changed everything. Mom, why aren't you going? You're the toughest person I know. Grace smiled and ruffled his hair. There are a lot of people stronger than me, kiddo. Her husband Dan looked up from his book. But not smarter. Not when it comes to fighting. The next day, Grace called an old friend from her Marine days who helped her sign up. Most people laughed when the 42-year-old woman with gray in her brown hair joined the competition. They stopped laughing after her first 3 matches. In Washington, Lisa Young watched the tournament feeds with growing interest. "Did you see that?" she asked Ellen, pointing to the screen where Grace had just defeated a man twice her size. Ellen nodded. "She barely seems to move, but she always ends up in the right position. She's not the strongest or the fastest," Lisa said, "but she might be the smartest fighter I've ever seen." The tournament continued for 2 weeks. Thousands of fighters became hundreds, then dozens, then just a handful. Grace advanced through each round, often winning against opponents who seemed unbeatable. In the final match, Grace faced a Navy SEAL named John Rogers. He was younger, stronger, and had never lost a fight. The arena was silent as they stepped onto the mat. The fight lasted 8 minutes. John attacked with perfect technique, but Grace seemed to read his moves before he made them. When it ended, Grace stood while John lay on the mat, unable to continue. The president herself came to Nevada to meet Earth's champion. She found Grace in a small room, icing her bruised knuckles. "Ms. Miller," the president said, "I need to know if you understand what we're asking of you." Grace looked up with calm eyes. "You're not asking, ma'am," I volunteered. "You'll be fighting an alien we know nothing about, except that it's won hundreds of fights across the galaxy. Every fight is against an unknown," Grace said, "until it isn't." 2 days later, Grace arrived at a secret facility in Colorado. A team waited to prepare her for the coming battle. Dr. Olivia Martinez was a scientist who studied alien biology. Frank Carter was a weapons expert who had designed fighting tools for every environment. Dr. William Pierce was a psychologist who would help Grace prepare mentally. Kevin Hudson was a tech specialist tasked with creating special equipment. "Welcome to Project Endgame," Lisa said as she led Grace through the facility. "For the next 7 weeks, this is your home." Ellen showed Grace the data they had gathered about the Zarkon. They evolved on a high-gravity planet. They're stronger and faster than humans. Grace nodded. "What else?" "That's the problem," Ellen admitted. "We don't know much more." "Then we prepare for everything," Grace said. Training began the next morning. Grace worked 18 hours a day, studying combat styles, testing weapons, and preparing her body. She learned to fight in simulated environments that might match the coming battle arena. At night, she called home to talk to Dan and Joey. She never told them how hard the training was or how scared she felt. Instead, she asked about Joey's baseball games and Dan's garden. "I'll be home soon," she promised. But as the days passed and they learned more about the Zarkon champion named Kralvox, Grace wondered if that was a promise she could keep. 2 weeks before the alien ship was due to arrive, Lisa found Grace alone in the training room, practicing the same move over and over in the dark. "Do you think you can win?" Lisa asked. Grace paused, breathing hard. "I don't know, but I know they've never fought a human before." "Is that important?" Grace smiled slightly. It might be the most important thing of all. The message came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dr. Alan Brooks had been alone in the Deep Space Monitoring Lab when the signals first appeared on his screen. At first, he thought it was a glitch. Then he thought it was a prank from one of his colleagues. It wasn't either of those things. "This can't be right," he whispered to the empty room. The pattern was too regular, too structured. His hand shook as he reached for his phone. Within an hour, the quiet NASA facility had transformed into a hive of activity. By sunrise, Major Lisa Young had arrived with a team of military specialists. She was tall with short brown hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Show me everything, Doctor," she said, her voice calm despite the circumstances. Alan led her to the main console where the message continued to repeat. "It's definitely artificial, and definitely not from Earth." "You're telling me we just received a message from aliens?" Lisa asked, her expression unchanged. Yes, and we've translated part of it. Ellen pressed a button, and a rough translation appeared on the screen. The message was not friendly. The Zarkon Empire, as they called themselves, had conquered 37 star systems. They considered Earth their next target, but they followed a code. Each world could send its greatest warrior to face their champion in combat. The winner's planet would rule the losers. They want to fight us for the planet? Lissa asked. One fighter against their best. Alan confirmed. If we lose, they claim Earth. Within days, the news spread worldwide. Panic followed. People cleaned out stores, hid in bunkers, or partied like the world was ending. It might have been. In Washington, the president sat with her advisors around a large table. The room was silent after they watched the full translation of the alien message. How do we know they'll keep their word? Asked the Secretary of Defense, a man with gray hair and tired eyes. We don't, Lisa replied. She had been called to the White House to brief them. But their message included detailed accounts of previous conquests. They seemed to follow this ritual without exception. And if we refuse to participate? The president asked. Alan, who stood beside Lisa, cleared his throat. Their message was clear about that. They considered non-participation the same as surrender. The Secretary of State removed her glasses. We need to buy time. How long until they arrive? Based on the signal origin and their stated intentions, we have 3 months, Alan said. The president stood up and walked to the window. Outside, protesters had already gathered. Some held signs begging for peace. Others demanded military action. 3 months to find our best warrior, she said finally. Make it happen. Around the world, military leaders began compiling lists of their finest soldiers, special forces operators, combat veterans, martial arts champions, anyone who might stand a chance against an alien fighter. In his small apartment, Alan stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The fate of humanity might rest on one person's shoulders. How could anyone carry that weight? In her hotel room, Lisa reviewed combat footage of potential candidates. Most were men with impressive records, muscles, and medals. None seemed right for this impossible task. At the same time, in a small gym in rural Oregon, a woman named Grace Miller was teaching a self-defense class to a group of teenagers. She didn't know that in 3 weeks, her name would be on every list. She didn't know she would soon carry the hopes of an entire planet. Grace demonstrated a simple wrist escape to a young girl. It's not about being stronger, she explained in a patient voice. It's about understanding how to use what you have. The aliens were coming. Earth had 3 months to prepare. And somewhere among billions of people was one warrior who could save them all.